Okay, hello, shalom, everybody. Um, yeah, I'm recording it.
Hello.
So, hello, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. So this is going to be a very special event, as I mentioned before, that we have Rabbi Yosef Mimran over here, and as I mentioned before, he's done a lot of amazing things, and he's doing a lot of amazing things in spreading Pnimis Torah and making it accessible for people. We've talked about it many times by the Shirim that these concepts are literally the Geula is dependent on these things and on being able um, to bring Pnimis Torah and allow it to be ma'orer people, to wake people up, wake up people's hearts to connect to Hashem in a deeper and more meaningful way. And Rabbi Mimran's doing that over there. He has a kollel, he has 50 Avreichim in the kollel learning, and supports families. And the website, I saw there's shirim, incredible shirim in all different aspects of Pnimius Torah. There's shirim. I saw that there's shirim on Kavanus Rashash and complicated things. And there's also shirim on Dvaikus, on meditation, on concepts that people can relate to. So he's doing very amazing work. So as I mentioned before, it would be very, very nice, if possible, if everyone could at least give something towards the yeshiva. I sent her an email exactly on how that can be done. So Bez Hashem, if that's possible, that would be really amazing. Now about this, what Rabbi Mimran is going to be talking about tonight for us, the concept of connecting Pnimis Torah, connecting Kabbalah to quantum physics. So I'll share something with you that I've never shared publicly before. I've talked about it to some people privately, but never in a public setting. Is I had a dream like around 4 years ago. And okay, dreams don't have to mean anything, but I had a dream that there was a Mekibel and a scientist that had to meet, and the Sultan was putting in all the koiches. The Sultan was doing whatever he could do to prevent these two from meeting, and the two groups that were on the two sides were fighting with each other. That this Mekibel's Jewish people didn't want him to meet the scientist, and the scientists people were saying it's ridiculous. Why do you want me to meet a rabbi? Okay, that was a dream that I had. So whether it meant anything or not, whether it came from Shemaim or just came from my own head, is a different story. But the idea is that inspired me sort of to start thinking about how these two concepts really could be one, and that truthfully, if someone looks at these two different things, they should make sense, because Kabbalah, we know, talks about Olam Atzilus and other higher worlds that are beyond the physical, but we know that everything is a mirror, so it should correspond down here too. So really, be'emes, if someone would be able to synthesize these two things, they could really get to the true nature of reality, which I think is a very important thing. So that's why in the Shirim, since then in the Shirim, I've been talking a lot more about how certain concepts we find relate to different concepts we have in science and these kinds of things. I have my friend Rabbi Kiva Lazar, friend of my Talmud, Rabbi Kiva Lazar, who was here a second ago, but I don't see him now. But oh yeah, no, that's AL, right? So we've talked a lot about these things privately during our different discussions. And Rabbi Kiva also introduced me to a friend of his, a quantum physicist named Brian, a Jewish quantum physicist, who I started speaking to, and we had some very deep discussions about these concepts. But now, Bez Hashem, we just saw on Monday, we saw on the Mimran shir, we're holding in Torah Yud Tes, that, the Hasidim say there's a siman for siyata d'shmaya, when there's a certain concept that you keep finding in one cipher, and you look at a different cipher, you find it there too. So it was amazing. We were learning on Monday, I heard that Rabbi Mimran's here, and then Monday night in the Mimran shir, we saw that Rabbi Nachman says over there that for a person to be able to really understand what's going on in reality, he has to be a bookie in Chachmas Kabbalah and a bookie in Chachmas Teva, meaning nature, meaning science, right? So I thought that was very interesting. That right when we were talking about that, Bez Hashem, now we're going to be zoicha to hear a little bit of how these two things connect, and to have a little bit of a deeper dimension of Pnimis Torah and what it really means. So it's with great anticipation, excitement, that I present to you Rav Agun Rabbi Yosef Mimran Shlita.
Shalom uvracha, everyone. Everybody can hear me all right?
Shalom. Yes.
Okay, so set up over here. Nice to meet everyone. And let me just introduce myself. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Rosh Kollel in Gateshead, England. We have a halacha kollel that we've been learning halacha for many years, Rosh Mishpat and other inyanim. I also have a center of Balachuvas in Yerushalayim as well. We take care of kids at risk. And so there's a passion to help causes like that. I'm also a student of Rav Yaakov Hillel. I don't know if you've heard of him. Rav Yaakov Hillel, I think he is the biggest Kabbalist of our generation, Rav Yaakov Hillel. I was offered to be his Talmid for many years, especially with Sforim. I was Nene, and I'm very close with him. There are many books that I've written on Kabbalah, both in Hebrew and in English. I would suggest anybody starting off with learning Kabbalah that they should start obviously with Otzot Chaim. That's the beginning save, and I wrote a pirush on Otzot Chaim. And also I've written in English various books. This is one of them, The Ultimate Connection with God. So if you're looking for something, it's sold on Amazon. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction to what I wanted to say to you. So we're going to just jump into it right now. About a little bit of introduction. I understand some of you learn Kabbalah, some people are more advanced, some people are less advanced. Okay, so we can't address everything in one class, but what we can do is that we can synthesize, like Rabbi said, I want to speak about Kabbalah and I want to speak about quantum physics. Now, when we talk about science, we've got to be very careful. We're not talking about the theories of science. We're not interested in the theories. We're interested in what they can prove. You know, the actual facts and figures, mathematical equations that make sense, that can be proven. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for their theory. So whatever they've proven, then and it's useful for us to have a better understanding of Kabbalah or Yiddishkeit in general. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I just want to make that very, very clear. Okay, so let's just run through a very quick introduction for those who don't know Kabbalah, what the Arizal is talking about. Okay, so I have to be magdim that Arizal wasn't mechadish anything really particularly. The Arizal, all he did really was just open up the Sefer Zohar. The Sefer Zohar was very, very social, very, very closed. It was very difficult for people to read it. They didn't really understand what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was trying to say over there. And he worked and worked. He locked himself in a house in Mitzrayim for 10 years, literally 10 years, and broke his head and opened up got Siyat Shmaya, got Gilu Eliyahu, and therefore he was able to see and understand the Zohar properly. Now, what he learned from there is what we're going to be discussing over here, because there's many derachim to Kabbalah. Okay, there's many ways you can learn Kabbalah. You have the Kabbalah of the Sefer Yetzirah. You have the Kabbalah of Sefer Bahir, Sefer Hechalot. You have multiple Kabbalahs that we do have. But what we're going to be doing, we're going to be learning the Kabbalah of the Arizal, the way he learned, as opposed to the Ramak. The Ramak of Moshe Chodevero, that's another way of learning Kabbalah. It's different from the Arizal. Okay, just want to put that out there. So let's learn. So in the beginning, the Sefer Otzot Chaim, Mitzrayim starts that in the beginning, the way Hashem created the world, that there was something called the Or Chesed. Or Makiv Or Ein Sof. The Leshem explains that the Or Ein Sof itself was a creation. That means the first introduction that we have is that even though we're talking about the most spiritual level in Judaism that we have, the most spiritual books, volume that we have in Yiddishkeit is Kabbalah. Is Kabbalah. You can't get more than that with Zohar. Alpha became where there's no mention of Hashem. No mention of Hashem. We're not talking about Hashem. We're talking about what Hashem created. It's stage two. Zohar talks about the Ein HaSaga Klum. We don't have a saga in Hashem whatsoever, but rather we're looking at the picture after it's done. meaning that Hashem is giving clues to himself, to his midos, through his creation. And it's for us to figure it out. We're here to recognize Hashem through his creation. So that's why it's very, very important to understand Kabbalah, understand how he created the world, and that way we can work backwards and emanate Hashem and become closer to Hashem through becoming like him. So the way he starts is Or and Sof, which is what we call the Or Chesed. Then Hashem decides, Kaviyachol Hashem, in quotation marks, decides to make a mokum tunnel, to make an empty space, a space in the middle, be'emsa. Now, all the Mefarshim ask, it can't be be'emsa, doesn't make sense, because if you have infinity, there's no middle in infinity. Well, based on Yehuda, Kem Shlomo, explain different pshatim. We're not going to go into details right now. And then he creates a space, and then he puts in that space the kav, which is a light, which is basically the Or and Sof mitzumtzum, that's Tzimtzum Aleph, that comes into the kav. So everybody has the picture, so you can just basically look at it as total white light, then a dispersion of the white light, and then you have a kav coming in, okay, which is the Or and Sof coming in, b'mius. And with that, Otto Chaim doesn't speak about this, but the Etz Chaim speaks about how that is mitpatzel into three different kavim, opens up to three different. One kav comes in, opens up to three different kavim. Now, why three different kavim? The Etz Chaim explains that we're talking about the first world developing. Now, you have to understand when we're talking about world, there's nothing. We're talking about way before the creation of the world. We're talking about this is the beginning of the universe. This is Aleph base in the universe. So we have three kavim coming in. They don't go all the way down to touch the other part of the kav, because we're looking at this as a 360 dimensional space. They're coming in, but all the way down, three kavim, and that's Adam Kadmon. We call them Ak. Not Adam Rishon, not to be confused. We're not talking about the first man, because we're way before that in the story. We're talking about Adam Kadmon. Okay, everybody follow me? Can anybody show me signs as they're following me here? Okay, one person's following. Okay, that's good enough. So we'll continue here. Okay, we have Adam Kadmon. That is the story. Okay, that's how it starts, and then from the Naimdak, it starts the Shani as everybody's learned, creating more and more worlds, the world of Brudim, and then the world of Atzilus and Bria, and the Yetzirah and Asir. That continues on and onwards. Okay. Now, I want to stop it there. Ad Kan Kabbalah. Now, that is literally what the Arizal says, and obviously with much more details. Now, we have to look at this information for what it is. Now, what does it give us to learn this? We have to just take a step back for it. Now, has our life changed to know this Kabbalah now? What can we do with this information? How does it help us in our avodas Hashem? It's very nice to know, what happened in the history of our creation, but we want to know, why was this information given to us? For what purpose? Just for mental exercise? For our intellect? Just for us to know how Hashem created the world? I don't think so. Because what people don't understand about the Arizal, that he was communicating with us very, very important information. This information has to help you in life. This information is crucial for you to serve Hashem. Now try to figure that out. Now, how does that fit into the Mokum Tzimtzum and the Kav coming in and the Patzel becoming Adam Kadmon? Adam Kadmon is B'Tselem. We are B'Tselem Elokim. We are the image of that Adam Kadmon. What is this? So like I said, we have to understand this. The Arizal got Gilui Eliyahu. He had a prophecy. This is a prophecy. Now let me ask you one little question. I don't know if you realize what a prophecy is. A prophecy is not something you read in a book and tell your friend. A prophecy is an experience. Now, let's say you're skiing down the highest mountain in the world. Okay, let's say Mount Everest or whatever. and you're skiing down, you're having a great time. This is the most exciting thing ever. You're the best skier in the world, and you're doing flips, and you come down the mountain, and you're alive. That's it. You're alive, and you just had the thrill of your life. Now, how do you expect to explain that to people? Is that even possible? You start telling me, yeah, I was skiing down. It just doesn't mean anything to people. Yeah, they saw you, but for you, it changed your life. That was the most exciting thing that ever happened to you. Or let's say you're going and you just go through a terrible accident, the car flipped over, whatever, and you were traumatized, and you try to explain 2 years afterwards what happened. You yourself are forgetting everything that happened to you. It's hard for you to explain the experience because an experience is personal. That's prophecy. A prophecy is something that is personal to you, that's given, Hashem gives it to you for yourself. And then you have to communicate that to other people. Okay? It's like, can you communicate verbally the notion of love? It's something you feel inside of you, but how can you communicate that to the point where the person feels exactly what you've experienced with that love? That's impossible. So you have to use a very primal instinct called words and maybe sensations or whatnot in order to get your message over. But you have to understand, you have this prophecy that is really high in your mind, that you're really feeling and sensing with all your body, till it comes out of your mouth. You've already lost 80% of the message. That entire message you won't be able to verbalize that message. Okay, so that's what's going on. You have the Arizal going through a tremendous revelation that's never ever happened, explaining, trying to bring this down, downloading it to the humanity is an impossible task. Impossible. Now, let me give you just a little bit of an example of what I'm talking about here. Because when we're dealing with the spiritual world, that's a complete contradiction to the material world. The spiritual world, we're dealing with infinite dimensions. Infinite dimensions. Now, those who don't understand what dimensions mean, let me give you a little story. There was once upon a time a novel in times of Shakespeare that was written called The Flatland. If you ever heard of this book, but I use it a lot to explain to people what we mean by, they call it the spiritual world. What are these spiritual worlds? The scientists call these dimensions. So there was once upon a time, the story goes, is that there was a world that was only 2 dimensions. And those who don't understand 2 dimensions, very simple. It's a flat piece of paper, very flat. And even a piece of paper has a dimension of width, but just imagine there's no width whatsoever. There's just length there's no height, there's only length and width, no height. So imagine these flat pieces of paper shuffling around on a 2-dimensional plane, on this table or whatever, okay? But they can't look up. Now just imagine a 3rd-dimensional being lands in the 2-dimensional world. Okay, so let's say this is the 2-dimensional world, very flat, and they're shuffling around here. And I were to bring my hand, me being a 3-dimensional being, bringing my hand down into a 2-dimensional world. What do you think they see from my hand? Anybody know? You know what they would see? 5 fingerprints. That's all they would see. They wouldn't even see my hand because they can't look up. Remember, they only have length and width. They can't look up. Okay, that's the 2-dimensional world experiencing a 3-dimensional being. So if I were to raise my hand up like this, they wouldn't see me at all. And you'd see them all discussing, we just saw 5 UFOs. And they've disappeared. And I'll put my hand back down. They say, oh, the UFOs are here, all 5 of them. And oh, they just disappeared. And I would be laughing my head off saying, these guys are crazy. They think I'm a UFO. It's my hand. But they're only seeing the imprints of my hand. Can you imagine that? That's their perspective. They only have a perspective of 2 dimensions. And I'm laughing. I have 3 dimensions. I'm saying, these guys are crazy. They think I'm a mysterious, mystical being. Now, one more time. Imagine you have our world, the 3-dimension, and you have a 4-dimensional being coming to us. How would that work? How would that work that we are three dimensions, four-dimensional beings coming to us? How much of them would we see? We wouldn't see all four dimensions because we're not hardwired for four dimensions. We're only three dimensions. We would only see three of the four dimensions. And therefore, we didn't see a complete perspective of them. You know, so what is that called? That is called, they call it ghosts. They call it UFOs. They call it unidentified objects because they can't see the entire perspective. Something that people can't see, they get mystified and go, it's crazy. In the same way, these two-dimensional people in this imaginary world called two dimensions are seeing five unidentified objects. Really, it's only one hand. They have a distorted vision of what's happening to them. Same thing with us. That's what it is. That's how different the material world is to the spiritual. We have a very misunderstanding of what the spiritual world, not for our fault, because we're not hardwired. So you imagine you're getting a nevuah, a prophecy from a 5, maybe a 10-dimensional world. You're trying to download it into a 3-dimensional physical world. That's impossible. That's impossible. How can you relate the 10-dimensional experience in a 3-dimensional world? So therefore, what's going to happen? The Ariza will need to write it down on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. And we draw these funny pictures and trying to say that, oh, this is the spiritual world. You know, I'm also accused because I write pictures in my books, but the only point is totally incorrect, totally incorrect. And you imagine how we are supposed to understand Kabbalah in that frame of reference, trying to understand a 10-dimensional on a 2-dimensional piece of paper. That's how bad it is, how ununderstandable this problem of learning Kabbalah is. And that's why, when I told you the whole story about Adam Kadmon, I wouldn't be surprised if half the people fell asleep, because it's not really interesting. You know, we talk about Kabbalah, oh, it's so special, so mystic. You know, a lot of people find it very dry, and that's why a lot of people don't learn it. It's not exciting. Well, of course, because you're learning it on a 2-dimensional frame of reference, of course it's not going to be exciting. So you know who addressed this problem? You have 4 tzaddikim. 4 tzaddikim came along to address this problem because they knew they had nevuah. They themselves had ruach hakodesh, and they realized what Kabbalah really is, and they try to make it in a frame of reference to make it more real for us. You know who these tzaddikim were? I'll tell you in a minute. But there's an acronym for them that we sort of put them in a frame of reference for ourselves, and we called it PALDIS. PALDIS. As we all know, PALDIS means, you know, it's another fancy word for Kabbalah and the Ramah and Yeridea. So it's the Rambam, how one who wants to retire a bit PALDIS, to be Mali, both of the cases, that means he has to know a lot of Torah before he learns Kabbalah, which is not necessarily for nowadays. But anyways, he uses the lotion of Paldis. Now, Paldis is an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Dush, and Sod. So who are these 4 tzaddikim? They are the Rashash, the Gaon of Vilna, the Ramchal, and the Baal Shem Tov. Of course, there are a lot of tzaddikim who explained Kabbalah, but those are our 4 main teachers that we group them. Now, who's the Pshat? That's the Rashash. The Rashash is Shalom Sharaf. He came along and really tried to give us the granule system as it is, to explain to us the Kavanas, to explain to us all the different contrary things that we see in the Arizal, a lot of contradictions there in the Arizal. So he, with his tremendous genius of a brain, put everything together to make a system where we can use, as opposed to just to intellectually engage with a 2-dimensional time. So you're using it as an avoda, you're using it as practically, you're learning what the word boch means, ata, and you sing the shepherd going on, Elias man, you read this mad, and so on and so forth. That's the first tzaddik. That's the way he approached the limud of Kabbalah. Now, another approach was Gaon Vilna, a different approach, more on the remes. a lot of Ramazim he used. He's everywhere. He throws it in Mishle, in Megillah, in all different places. In he uses it completely. He understood Kabbalah in his perspective. Again, trying to bring in that speciality. There's also the Ramchal, Drush. He brings in more midot, the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ben Adam leMakom, and all these different types of strategies in order to make it more plausible for a person. And then there was the Baal Shem. They say that he knew the sod of the Kabbalah, but again, he's using more on the system that ben Adam leChavero, ben Adam leMakom as an avoider towards using it practically, as opposed to just being intellectual. Okay, those are the four tzaddikim, four different mahaltim, how to get around this problem and making more real for us. Now, today I'm going to teach you a fifth way of learning Kabbalah. Okay, this is where we want to get to over here. So I don't know how much more time we have here. Okay, so as long as you don't fall asleep on it. Okay, so this mahalech is what the Rabbi already introduced. We're going to talk about a little bit of quantum physics. Now, I said again, we're not talking about the theory. We're talking about the actual whatever they've actually quantified as mathematical equations, physics involved. Again, we're not going to go through any of that. We're going to just go through the general ideas. And why I've decided that's a very important way to understand, because they're dealing with the nature of light, for example. The nature of light. You ever hear such a question? We take light for granted. What is light? Light is you come in the kitchen, everything's light, right? What is light? Why do you have to think about light? Well, because once you understand the nature of light, then you can use light to do various things. Okay, there's something called a molecule, and inside the molecule you have protons and photons and electrons. And once you know how to harness that power, you can make a nuclear bomb. There's a lot of things that you can do once you understand the nature of light. So let me just tell you a few things about quantum physics, and then we're going to tie back to Kabbalah to really give it some sense and really give us a feeling of this nevuah of the Arizal, that what he felt. And that's the Hagosha, that's what's missing in the limud of Kabbalah nowadays. We have to feel the Kabbalah, not only just intellectually bring it down to our minds, we have to bring it down to our hearts as well. Okay, so there was a famous, so we're going to talk about the lights. Lights. Now, why is that important for us? Scientists talk about the nature of light, but the Torah starts with Vayi'or. Talk about light. Kabbalah is all about light. There's nothing else but lights in Kabbalah. The Gemara talks about how Hashem created the world. He created with the hay. So we're talking about Sha'akudim, how the hay splits up in Dalet and Vav. That's 10. There's the 10 spheres, the 10 lights, the emanations of the 10 lights. Everything comes down to light. You can't get around it. The world and everything was created through light. So it's very important for us to understand what is light. So these chokrim, as we call them, these scientists have delved deep into light. So maybe they have some information that can help us. So there was a famous experiment was in 1805 by Mr. Thompson, a physicist, and he has invented a interesting experiment called the double slit experiment. You probably heard of it. It's very, very famous. And this was repeated over and over again to be proven totally correct, and you can even do this at home. It's not a very difficult experiment. This is what he did. So you have two things in science. So you have the particles and you have waves. Let me explain to you. Very simple. So for example, let's say you had marbles. Let's take it very, very simple. You have marbles. And in front of you, you have a mechitza. You have a partition. And in this partition, you have a gap in the partition. And behind the partition, you have a wall. We get it? So if you were to throw a marble through the partition and hit the wall, you'd see an indentation in the wall. Right through, directly through the partition. Does that make sense? And if you throw 100 marbles, you wouldn't see the marbles all over the wall. That's impossible because they can't go through the wall. They can only go through the partition. So you'd see all the marbles where in one line. Make sense? Good. Now, any questions? Now, let's say you do the exact same experiment, but you have water. So you have a wall, you have a partition in front of the wall, and you have water. The water goes through the partition, and let's say that the water it's colored water, and it would make the most impression directly. The wall will have an impression directly in front of the slits. Okay, does that make sense? It wouldn't have impressions all around the wall particularly, but it would. But the most concentrated part would be right in front of the partition. Now, let's say you have two partitions. What would happen? Let's go back to the marbles. So when you throw the marbles, what would happen? You go through one partition, and the back of the wall would be indentations. You throw through the other indentation, you find marbles on the other side. So now you have two lines of marbles. Makes sense? No problem. Now, when you do water with the two indentations, something happens. It's called interference. So the water would go through both, and by the time it hits the wall, the water, the troughs and the waves would hit each other, and that would be a distortion in the waves. And when it hits the wall, you would find the wall with 5 or 6 indentations or markings where the water hits the most, strongest. You know, there's a waves, so you have waves bashing into each other and then bashing into the wall, and you'd see them as 5 indentations. So even though you only have 2 slits, with 5 or 6 indentations caused by the wall. Okay, so those 2 experiments, that's called the particle experiment. Particle is very straightforward. You throw the particles through the slits. They're right on the wall, and through the wave experiment, you'd find them all scattered because water doesn't have that restriction. Very simple. Now, when you're learning quantum physics, and you go into what's called the quantum world, meaning there's 2 ways to look at the world. You can look at the world on a global, like Avram Avinu, he went out, saw the stars, saw the universe, saw everything, the mazalot, he saw that, or you can look at the miniature parts of the world and try to figure out through the granule, looking through microscopes, you can see everything, the building blocks of the world, the molecules, everything. That's 2 ways to look at it. Now, when you look at the quantum world, you're looking deep into the world. So when you're looking deep into when you do the exact same exercise, you find something fascinating. So now you're going to take now the same exercise, the same experiment, but with lights. You throw lights through one slit, what's going to happen? The light is going to hit the back of the wall as a line. Makes sense, because the light can't go through the wall. It could only go through where the slit is. Now, if you have 2 slits, this is the interesting part. You'd think it worked like particles, that it would go and only hit 2 parts of the wall, but you see 5 parts of the wall. 5 parts of the wall. It's completely dispersed, meaning it's working like a wave. It's not working like particles. So from there, that experiment showed, the scientists, and Albert Einstein also did experiments as well in 1905, and they said that light, the nature of light is like the wave function and not the particle function. Now, this is the interesting part. They wanted to find exactly more into details, so they established an observation of the experiment. And when they started observing, they put these cameras all by the slits to see exactly which hole it falls into and so on and so forth. Everything changed. The light, instead of working like waves, it started working like particles. That's incredible. Just the fact that they start observing the process, it changed the experiment. That makes no sense. They were mind-boggled. The scientists didn't know what to put themselves. Didn't make any sense. So through Kabbalah, we can explain it. And the answer to that is that through observing, the Arizal talks about the koach hariyah, and even gives an example of the ostrich, famous. Basiana. When you look, the ostrich could be changed nowadays. The ostrich, but the ostrich, when it looks at its egg and creates heat and ferments the egg, and the egg hatches through the fact, just a pure observation. Isn't that amazing? The Arizal calls that koach ria. Koach ria. And the Arizal talks about also a musa called koach shmir, koach machshava. All these facets that we're not really in touch with. We know physical, you touch something, but to able to manipulate matter with eyes, like these scientists saw in front of their faces, they saw an exercises change. When you look, you get one result. When you don't look, you get another result. What does that mean? But we can understand that. We have that Messiah that shows us that once you look at something, the observable experiment changes. Now, let's continue. Let's continue with another famous example. Now, I don't know if you heard about this, but this is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. There's somebody called Dr. Moto. Now listen to this. He did something really crazy. Like this Dr. Moto, what he did is that he decided he wanted to find out whether he could change the nature of water. What did he do? Listen to what he did. He took a glass of water, took multiple glasses of water, and started talking to the water. Now, this was all documented. This is amazing. He documented that if you talk nicely to the water and you praise it, and you stick it in the freezer, and you take it out when it's all frozen, what he did was he took a slice of the frozen water and put it under a microscope, and he saw these beautiful crystals. The water crystallized into beautiful crystals. Okay, very good. But listen to what he did then. He took another glass of water and said bad things to it. Do you know this exercise? He started yelling at the water. He said, "You're no good. You're worth nothing." He went on and then stuck it in the freezer. Left it for 3 days, took it out, took a sample of the ice, put under the microscope, and he saw that it was ugly. It was no longer beautiful crystals, but it was brown. It was so distorted. And he said, look at that, just the fact that I spoke to it, it changed the molecular structure of the water. Isn't that amazing? So how does he explain that? He can't. It's just a feat of nature, a mystery. Well, the way we explain, the way it's taught to us in Kabbalah, again, that's the koach hapeh. He talks about the koach hapeh. Not we're talking about speaking eloquently. We're talking about a mystical, a spiritual power that comes out from the mouth that has a power of procreation. And by the way, that's the whole secret of making a bracha. Why do we make a bracha? Because we actually influence the materials that we're about to eat. We cleanse. In Kabbalah, we're cleansing the food. And that's where we can digest it by cleansing it. That gives it koach. He's just proving to us that you can influence food. He made another experiment. He did better than that. What he did now is he took 2 glasses of water. On 1 glass of water, he put the word love. That's all he did. And he put it in the fridge, in the freezer. Another glass of water, he wrote, I hate you. Put it. He said, let's see if that works. Same experiment, took both of them, took a slice of the ice, put it under the microscope on both of them, and he was amazed to see, and again, this is all documented, and you could probably do it at home as well, very simple exercise, and look at, he saw the difference was enormous. One was beautiful crystals that looked like diamonds, one said love on it, and the other one was distorted, brown, and smelly. Look at that. So what do we see from there? So we went from a koach ria. Now we're talking about koach a machshava. It's just a machshava. He just thought about it. So is that surprising to us? No, because we know in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, all talk about the koach machshava. All these kavanahs of the Rashash are all only Kabbalah, only machshava. What should that help? What am I doing by just thinking about something? Thinking about this Havaya, that Havaya, this, the Shiluv, the Eke, Elohim. What am I doing? Look at that. He's bringing us a proof that just by Shov I can change the molecular structure of water. Just by thinking that this I love and that I hate. It's amazing. We did a final experiment as well about rice. You have 3 cups of rice and water. One again, he praised it. The other one he ignored. The other one he spoke terribly about. Comes back 3 days later on. The one he spoke nicely had a beautiful aroma. It smelled beautiful. The one he ignored started turning green, went moldy. And the one that he spoke about bad about turned black. Exact same rice, 3 different experiences, 3 different outcomes. Isn't that amazing? Let me give you one more. It was an amazing experience that happened in China. In China, there was the story goes that I saw the documentary that there's a woman with a large cancer, a tumor in her stomach. The size really of a golf ball, no, not golf ball, of a grapefruit. Huge. It was absolutely huge. So they had this woman lying down in the hospital. She tried all different types of treatment, and she decided, I'm going to go to China and try this spooky, practitioner healing method. That they have 5 practitioners, and all they do is that they pray. They pray, but not only praying. What they do is that they have the intention that she is cured. Okay. Maybe I'll send you a link to this. This is fascinating. I've never seen anything like this. So again, you have this poor woman lying there, and these 5 men around her, and you see on the clip over there that the CAT scan is showing you 2 pictures: one before, one after. Before is obviously with a big, huge tumor in her body, and the other one is actually, lifetime. And then these practitioners start chanting, "You are well, you are well, you are well, you are well, you are cured, you are cured." And you see in lifetime that the old pictures, that this big, grapefruit, and then you see the new, the live picture, and you see the way it becomes smaller and smaller in lifetime until it disappears. Literally takes 30 seconds. And then at the end, they're all clapping, and they're all proud of themselves that they did this. So how did they do this? So all these examples and all these quantum physics, what is that showing to us? It's showing to us that reality as we know it is not really as we think it is. Okay? We're dealing with a lot of dimensions. We talk about interdimensional interactions with higher dimensions and lower dimensions. And therefore, when we're talking about Adam Kadmon, let's go back to what we discussed earlier on. Let's now try to learn it in this perspective. We know we're all B'Tselem Elokim. But what we don't understand is that we have the power of B'Tselem Elokim. So what the Arizal was trying, what I understood, what the Arizal was trying to explain over there, is the power of each one of us. Because when we see, the pasuk in the Torah, when it starts off, it says, "We're B'Tselem Elokim," that is a phenomenal event that you're reducing the spiritual world into something very, very physical. But don't forget, you're always attached to that original dogma, that original example of who you are. You are B'Tselem Elokim. That's the power of who you are. And therefore, this is really the punchline. When you're learning Kabbalah, you're learning about yourself. You're learning about the roots and the roots, the shoresh of who you really are. And therefore, when you're learning, you have to understand you're learning about yourself. You're learning about your true qualities and your powers that you have. Like we showed, life is not so straightforward. The fact that these scientists are doing the observations and they're observing, and it changes the result of the experiment. By speaking to a glass of water, it changes the molecular structure. These practitioners are able to think good things about this woman and make this cancer go away. Shows you that a person has tremendous powers. that we're not tapping into. And all comes down to Kabbalah. So I just want to throw that at you. So having through that perspective of learning a little bit of quantum physics, learning a little about Einstein of E equals mc squared, meaning that energy equals matter. I mean, energy, what we call light, what we call the spiritual shefa, is equal, creates matter times the velocity times 2, to the power of 2. Learning these simple equations gives a completely different perspective on what we're talking about. It becomes real at that point. It's not something that happened, but is happening. It's a procreation process. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that as a machshava, and thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions, you can ask the rabbi. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer you.
Not in quantum physics, but
So, nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Shkoyach, everyone, thank you for participating. And Bez Hashem, next Wednesday we're going to be starting the Shir and Sarfat Tznisa with the Guru, Bez Hashem. So we're going to have that available, the text. I'm going to put that on the Google Drive. And also, I think that we might have some in Miriam's for us, Miriam's Judaica, for us to be able to use. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope everyone appreciated it. And Bez Hashem, tomorrow is the Shir on the Parsha.
Excuse me, Rabbi Kidvinsky. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How long Rav Mimran will stay in town?
I think until Tuesday.
Tuesday, and where can we find him? Where does it daven if we want to just meet him personally, or?
Tell me the number. Okay, so you can reach him at this number. I'm gonna also send an email about it later, just in case. But
Thank you.
1732-962-2760.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and I also want to tell Rabbi Kiva that Mimran will be in Florida this coming week. Next week, Wednesday. Yeah. Next Wednesday, Hashem is going to be in Florida. So, Rabbi Kiva, if you want to, I'm going to also give you his number too. You can take down the number, or I'll send an email about it too. So maybe you could meet him over there. Maybe take him around a little bit or whatever. Okay. All right, everyone. Is that Kiva there? Kiva, yeah. Yeah. You know him? I have Nissan sends regards to Kiva. Okay. Kiva, how are you? Okay. All right, everyone. Shkoyach, thank you for participating, and Bez Hashem, see you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Rabbi Kidvinsky. One more question I have for you. Are you available later tonight? I probably have a phone call with you or not?
Should be fine.
What time can I call you? Or Zoom meeting, whatever is easier for you.
Let me, once I get home from here, then I'll first have to put my son to sleep, and then maybe like around 11 maybe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, have a good night for now, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.